What's an oddly specific and suspicious fact that you know? The smell of cutting into a human skull is eerily similar to that of opening a fresh bag of fritters. You either learn to hate fritters or get hungry around the smell of skull dust. The Pepsi Cola company once responded to a man who claimed to have found a mouse in his can of Mountain Dew, stating that due to the high concentration of citric acid, any biological remains left in a can from the canning to consumption time frame would be dissolved before opening. I was sat down by a supervisor because I could tell them that the burnt plastic smell in the bathroom meant someone did illegal substances in there, and we need to watch out for needles in the trash. I'd recently transferred there from a store where it was at least a weekly problem for a while. The stringy things inside bananas are called phloem bundles. They allow the nutrients of the banana to travel the length of the fruit. They are kinda like the vascular system of the plant. Marie Curie's body will continue to emit radiation for another millennium and a half. You have to sign a liability waiver if you want to see anything she owned, because she was so radioactive. Chainsaws were invented for childbirth and were held by one hand and was manually spun by the other. They cut a tiny piece of the pelvis off to let the baby come out easier. In high school, in a science class, the teacher asked the class if anyone knew how many grams were in a pound. A stoner kid in the back immediately said 454. The teacher asked him how he knew that. I just do. An ear infection left untreated can grow and sit for years on end, slowly eating away at your ear canal. If untreated long enough, the erosion causes dead skin cells in your ear unable to escape, so they build up into a benign cyst called a cholesteatoma. Left untreated, this can grow and affect balance, facial movement, and eventually lead to deathly infection. Cholesteatomas can also happen spontaneously without any infections. I have had two removed. The second one was wrapped around my facial nerve and caused damage similar to Bell's palsy. I now have balance issues and am mostly deaf in that ear due to the fact that though cholesteatomas consist of just cholesterol and dead skin cells, they can eat through bone. I lost my stapes, incus, and some of the surrounding bone. I now have a fair-sized hole in my head. I would never have known I had anything wrong the first time, but my dog, a GSD, wouldn't stop sticking his nose in my ear. I finally figure out he was trying to tell me something. Second time, 4 years later, same reaction, different GSD. That time I didn't wait, got an appointment with my aunt right away. McDonald's. It costs more to make worm burgers than it does to make them out of beef. This was said by McDonald's to refute the claim they were padding out beef burgers with worm meat. Kids under 5 years will often try to hide from a fire. Instead of running, firefighters find the bodies. A dead person's fingerprint can't be used to open a laptop. There needs to be heat behind it. Source: I'm the it person in my family, and when my grandfather died, all of the family photos, his will, and all the other important documentation was on his fingerprint locked laptop. My 16-year-old self had to sheepishly hand the laptop to the medical examiner and ask her to see if she could get his fingerprint to open it. It didn't work. The cat intimacy pheromone and plastic bag are almost identical under a microscope. When a cat licks a plastic bag, it gets excited because it smells like the cat intimacy pheromone. If a person is hung upside down for too long, it can actually kill them. Their organs will put extra pressure on the lungs and heart, making breathing difficult and heart issues. The blood will rush to your head and could cause brain bleeds. The body is very fascinating. I had a classmate in college whose car slid off a mountain when he was driving in icy conditions. The car flipped upside down, but was caught in the branches of several trees. He hung upside down for a couple of days before he was found. This was in the days before most people could afford a cell phone. He did survive, but his eyes were blood red for several months because pressure burst so many blood vessels. He didn't have any whites visible in his eyes at all. Doctor said much longer, and he would have died. Rats necessarily have no musical preference, but when on illegal substances they prefer jazz. If your body gets severely low on vitamin C, your old scars will open back up. Even surgical scars. It's because even though they seem dormant and healed, they are actually constantly regenerating, which requires vitamin C. Platypus don't have nipples, they just sweat milk. A comma, more specifically the lack thereof, cost thousands of elderly and disabled individuals thousands of dollars, or prevented them from getting medical care in the 2000s and 2010s in the US. The Oxford comma is a comma placed immediately after the penultimate term in a series of 3 or more terms. It is not necessary to be grammatically correct, but it can lead to ambiguous interpretations of certain sentences. In this particular example, the US Congress ratified a Medicare law around 1999 that stipulated each person is entitled to X amount of dollars to cover occupational therapy, physical therapy and speech therapy. It was supposed to mean that there were 3 separate amounts that could be applied to each service separately, with the funds resetting with the calendar year. But because there was no comma between speech therapy and physical therapy, those services were forced to share the same pool of funds. This means that an individual that needed both services, like a stroke patient, would burn through those funds twice as fast. To make this worse, back then the law stipulated a hard cap on these funds. Read, when you're out. Too bad. So sad. The hard cap has since been repealed, but the comma issue was never fixed. Now they just have to do a lot of extra paperwork to get these services covered. The crazy thing is, this all happened because some dumb intern on Capitol Hill in the 90s made a typo, or simply didn't know better because they didn't pay attention in high school English. There was a study conducted where monkeys were given money for food, imprinting in their mind that money was something of value. Cue a short amount of time. Monkeys were now paying each other for intimate time. At the masses in Fresno, behind the makeup counter, there's a large structure containing some drawer stacks, a back wrap, and space for displays on top. If you remove all the drawers from one of the drawer stacks, a slim man can climb inside and be fairly comfortable to hide in there, if he can get his buddy to put the drawers back. If you're ever stuck on an island, do not eat sea turtles. They are what they eat, and they eat jellyfish, which will poison you. It builds up in their system. It may not be likely that you picked a bad one, but don't do it unless you have to. Certain species have more in them than others, and certain turtles do too. It's not insanely common. But if you're on an island, you don't take a risk unless you have to. People who have fished for them and eaten them regularly knew which ones were good and which weren't. Remember, if you're stuck on an island, not many people can distinguish species. Banana artificial flavoring is based on a type of banana that went extinct due to low genetic diversity, which is why it tastes completely different from real bananas. My uncle, who passed away a long time ago, told me casually one time when I was young that if you wanted to end someone silently, take a sharpened pencil, and when they are sleeping, hold the pencil with your left hand near the end where the eraser is, and then just place the pointy end at the entrance of their nostril, almost halfway down but not enough to wake them up, and then on the other end, use your right hand's palm and slap your hand to quickly jam the pencil all the way to their head. He said that they will just pass silently and do death throes and then die. He said that they will probably just remember a bad dream before they pass. I was like 12 to 14 when he told me this. I'm now almost 40 and it still haunts me to this day why he told me that. He's the nicest uncle I know, who would always be there for me and my siblings when we needed anything. Even if he's not feeling well, I hope he's found a nice place somewhere to be at peace.